The metallic taste of blood pooled in my mouth as I pressed my cheek against the cold bathroom tiles. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the sink, knuckles white, trying to steady myself against the wave of nausea that crashed through me. The fluorescent light above flickered. Once, twice, casting shadows that danced across the cracked mirror before me. I didn't want to look. I couldn't look. But I did. The woman staring back at me was barely recognizable. A split lip, already swelling purple. A bruise blooming across my left cheekbone like some grotesque flower. My right eye was beginning to swell shut, the skin around it tender and hot to the touch. I touched my ribs gingerly, wincing at the sharp pain that radiated through my torso with each shallow breath. Stupid, I whispered to my reflection. So stupid. Through the thin bathroom door, I could hear Marcus moving around our cramped apartment. The clink of a bottle against the coffee table. The scrape of his chair. The low murmur of the television playing some late-night show I couldn't quite make out. Each sound made me flinch, my body preparing for another assault that might or might not come. I turned on the faucet, letting the cold water run over my trembling hands. The icy shock helped ground me, pulled me back from the edge of panic that threatened to consume me whole. I cupped water in my palms and brought it to my face, hissing through my teeth as it stung the open cut on my lip. Pink-tinged water swirled down the drain, disappearing like everything else I'd lost over the past 2 years. My job, my friends, my dignity. It hadn't always been this way. Marcus had been different when we met. Charming, attentive, promising me a life beyond the cramped studio apartment I'd been living in while working double shifts at Romano's, an upscale Italian restaurant in the heart of the city. He'd swept me off my feet with expensive dinners I later learned he couldn't afford. With promises of stability I desperately craved after aging out of the foster system, with nothing but a high school diploma and a fierce determination to survive. The first time he hit me, he cried, apologized, swore it would never happen again. The second time, he blamed the stress of losing his job. By the third time, he didn't bother with excuses anymore. I dried my face carefully with a threadbare towel, avoiding the worst of the damage. My hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over as I opened the medicine cabinet and retrieved the small makeup bag I kept hidden behind Marcus's shaving cream. Foundation, concealer, powder. The tools of my trade in hiding the evidence of my shame. Tomorrow, I would wake up at 5 in the morning. I would apply twice the usual amount of makeup. I would put on my crisp white shirt and black slacks, tie my dark hair back in a neat bun, and I would go to work at Romano's like nothing had happened. I would smile at the wealthy patrons, refill their wine glasses, laugh at their jokes, and pretend I was anything other than a ghost haunting her own life, because that's what you did when you had nowhere else to go. I clicked off the bathroom light and opened the door as quietly as possible. Marcus was sprawled on our sagging couch, beer bottle dangling from his hand, eyes fixed on the television screen. He didn't look at me as I crept past him toward our bedroom, didn't acknowledge my existence at all. Sometimes being invisible was a mercy. I slipped between the thin sheets of our bed, curling into the farthest corner, making myself as small as possible. Sleep was a long time coming, interrupted by the throb of pain in my face and the soundtrack of Marcus's drunken snoring from the living room. The alarm pierced through my restless sleep at 5 o'clock sharp. I silenced it quickly, my body protesting as I dragged myself upright. Every muscle ached. My face felt tight and swollen. The skin stretched uncomfortably over the bruises I knew had darkened overnight. The apartment was silent except for Marcus's snoring. He'd passed out on the couch, still fully clothed, an array of empty bottles littering the floor around him. I moved through our morning routine like a wraith. Shower, makeup, uniform. The face that emerged from my careful ministrations looked almost human, though the foundation was caked on thick enough to feel like a mask. I caught the 6:15 bus, standing in the back, where the morning light wouldn't highlight what the makeup couldn't fully hide. The city was just beginning to wake up, streetlights still glowing against the gray dawn. I pressed my forehead against the cool window, watching the familiar route blur past. Romano's was located in the financial district, wedged between towering glass buildings that reflected the morning sun like mirrors. It was the kind of place where businessmen closed million-dollar deals over plates of handmade pasta, where politicians met in shadowed corners, where secrets were traded as freely as the expensive bottles of wine that lined the walls. I'd worked there for 3 years. It was the one good thing in my life, the one place where I felt like I had value. Giuseppe Romano, the owner, was a gruff Italian man in his 60s who'd taken a chance on me when I'd shown up desperate for work. He demanded perfection from his staff, but he was fair. He paid well. And most importantly, he asked no questions about the occasional bruises I couldn't quite hide. I entered through the back entrance at 6:45, tying my apron around my waist as I made my way through the kitchen. The familiar smells of garlic, fresh basil, and baking bread wrapped around me like a comfort. This was my sanctuary. "Mia," Giuseppe's booming voice called from his office. "Come here, ragazza." I swallowed hard, checking my reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator door before heading toward his office. Giuseppe stood behind his desk, his weathered face creased with what might have been concern. Beside him stood a younger man I didn't recognize. Early 30s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Mia, this is Marco." Giuseppe's voice was careful, measured. "He'll be working with us for a while. Private security consultation." The lie was obvious, but I nodded anyway. Giuseppe had connections. Everyone knew that. Romano's was neutral territory, in a city carved up by invisible borders and unspoken agreements. Marco extended his hand, and I took it automatically. His grip was firm but brief, his dark eyes scanning my face with an intensity that made me want to look away. He was handsome in a dangerous way. Sharp jawline, dark hair styled perfectly, eyes that seemed to see everything and miss nothing. "Pleasure," he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. I murmured something appropriate and escaped back to the main dining room, my heart hammering for reasons I couldn't quite name. Something about the way he'd looked at me made my skin prickle with awareness. Like he'd seen through the makeup, through the carefully constructed facade, straight to the broken thing underneath. The morning shift passed in a blur of preparation. We set tables with precise care. Silverware aligned perfectly, water glasses positioned just so, fresh flowers arranged in crystal vases. Romano's didn't open until 11, but Giuseppe insisted on perfection in every detail. I was polishing wine glasses when I felt someone watching me. I turned to find Marco leaning against the bar, his attention fixed on me with an unsettling focus. He'd removed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves to reveal forearms corded with muscle and scattered with scars that told stories I didn't want to know. "You're good at that," he said, nodding toward the glass in my hands. 3 years of practice. I set down the glass and picked up another, keeping my hands busy so I wouldn't have to meet his eyes. "Giuseppe says you're his best server. Giuseppe is generous with his praise." "I doubt that." Marco moved closer, and I caught his scent. Expensive cologne undercut with something darker, more primal. Leather and gunpowder and smoke. He doesn't seem like the generous type. I said nothing, focusing on the glass until it gleamed. "That's quite a bruise you're hiding under all that makeup." My hand stilled. The glass nearly slipped from my fingers. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" His voice was soft, almost gentle, but there was steel underneath. "I've seen enough concealer jobs to recognize one. You walked in here this morning moving like your ribs hurt. Your right eye is slightly swollen despite the ice you clearly applied before the makeup. And you flinched when Giuseppe raised his voice, even though he was just calling your name." Heat flooded my cheeks. Shame and anger twisted in my gut. "It's none of your business." Maybe not. He was close enough now that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "But it might become my business. Are you threatening me?" The words came out sharper than I intended, fear making me bold. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. "No, Mia. I'm not threatening you." "Then what are you doing?" Before he could answer, Giuseppe emerged from the kitchen, clapping his hands. "Enough standing around. Marco, I need to show you the security system. Mia, the Castellano party will be here at noon. Make sure their usual table is perfect." Marco held my gaze for one more heartbeat, and something passed between us, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred damage. Then he turned and followed Giuseppe, leaving me alone with my trembling hands and the uncomfortable sensation that my carefully constructed walls had just developed their first crack. I threw myself into work, preparing the private dining room for the Castellano party. They were regulars, old money, connected to everything and everyone in the city. I'd served them dozens of times, invisible in the way that service staff always are to people of their class. At 11:55, the first members of the party began to arrive. I recognized some faces, politicians, businessmen, a district attorney I'd seen on the news. They settled into the private room with the ease of people accustomed to power and privilege, and then he walked in. Dante Castellano. I'd seen him before, of course, served his table, poured his wine. But I'd never truly looked at him. Never allowed myself to see him as anything other than another customer. To look too closely at men like him was dangerous. But now, as he entered Romano's flanked by two massive men in dark suits, I couldn't help but stare. He was young. Couldn't have been more than 32, 33. Tall and lean, moving with a predator's grace. His suit was black and perfectly tailored, his dark hair styled in a way that probably required more effort than it appeared. But it was his face that captured attention. Beautiful in a cruel sort of way. All sharp angles and cold eyes that swept the room with calculated precision. Power radiated from him like heat from pavement in summer. Every person in the restaurant felt it. Conversations quieted, heads turned. Giuseppe himself came out to greet him, shaking his hand with a deference I'd never seen him show anyone else. I pressed myself against the wall near the kitchen, trying to become invisible again. But those cold eyes found me anyway, sweeping over me with the same clinical precision Marco had used earlier. For a moment, his gaze lingered on my face, and I saw something flicker there. Recognition? Curiosity? Before he turned away and disappeared into the private dining room. My hands were shaking again. I didn't know why. Dante Castellano was just another customer. Just another wealthy man in a city full of them. Except he wasn't. Everyone knew the Castellano name. Everyone knew what it meant. And everyone with half a brain knew to stay far, far away from the family's business. Mia. Giuseppe appeared at my elbow, his voice low. You'll be serving the private room today. Marco will be standing in. Security. Giuseppe, They requested you specifically. His eyes were worried. I would say no, but you didn't say no to the Castellanos. I understood. I straightened my spine, checked my makeup one more time in the reflection of a picture frame, and pushed through the doors into the private dining room. 12 men sat around the table. Dante Castellano sat at the head, flanked by his security. Marco stood near the wall, his eyes tracking my every movement. The air was thick with cigar smoke and expensive cologne, and something else. Something sharp and dangerous that made every instinct I had scream at me to run. Gentlemen, I said, my voice steady despite the fear crawling up my spine. Welcome to Romano's. May I start you with drinks? I moved around the table, taking orders, pouring water, pretending I didn't notice the way some of them looked at me. Assessing, dismissive, predatory. I'd grown used to those looks. In my world, women like me were disposable. But when I reached Dante Castellano, everything changed. He looked up at me, and this time, his gaze wasn't clinical. It was intense, focused, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't known existed. His eyes, dark brown, almost black, fixed on my face, and I watched as his expression shifted from polite indifference to something harder, colder. What happened to your face? His voice was quiet, but it cut through the conversation around us like a blade. The room went silent. My heart hammered against my ribs. I'm fine, sir. What can I get you to drink? That's not what I asked. He stood. And suddenly he was in front of me, invading my space in a way that should have been threatening, but felt oddly protective. His hand came up. I flinched instinctively, but he only tilted my chin gently, angling my face toward the light. Who did this to you? Mr. Castellano, please, answer me. Still quiet, still deadly. I fell. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, clumsy. His thumb brushed against my cheekbone, so gentle it made my eyes sting with unexpected tears. Don't lie to me, Mia. He knew my name. Of course he knew my name. Men like him knew everything. It's nothing, I whispered. Please, sir. I need this job. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. He released my chin and turned to his security. Find out where she lives, who she lives with. I want a full report by tonight. Mr. Castellano, I started, panic rising in my throat. He looked back at me, and for just a moment, I saw something almost human in those cold eyes. You're under my protection now, Mia, whether you want it or not. And with those words, he sat back down, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my life had just irrevocably changed. The rest of the lunch service passed in a haze. I served, I smiled, I pretended everything was normal. But I felt Dante's eyes on me constantly, tracking my every movement with an intensity that made my skin burn. When the party finally ended hours later, I retreated to the kitchen, my legs barely holding me upright. Giuseppe found me there, leaning against the walk-in freezer, trying to catch my breath. Mia. His voice was gentle. Go home early today. Paid. Giuseppe. Go home, ragazza. And Mia? He squeezed my shoulder. Whatever happens next, it's out of my hands now. I'm sorry. I didn't understand what he meant, not then. I changed out of my uniform in the staff bathroom, my hands still trembling as I pulled on my jeans and hoodie. When I emerged into the alley behind Romano's, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. A black Mercedes was parked at the mouth of the alley. Marco stood beside it, his expression unreadable. Get in, he said. I'm taking the bus. Not anymore. He opened the back door. Boss's orders. You get a ride home from now on. I don't need... Mia, his voice was firm. Get in the car, or I'll put you in it. Your choice. I got in the car. The drive to my apartment complex was silent except for the quiet hum of the engine. Marco didn't speak, didn't explain. When we pulled up in front of my building, a run-down complex on the wrong side of town, he turned to look at me. Lock your doors tonight, he said. And Mia? Castellano doesn't make empty threats. If he said you're under his protection, that's exactly what you are. I fled into my building without responding, my heart racing. Protection, what did that even mean? And why would someone like Dante Castellano care about a broken-down waitress with nowhere to go and no one to help her? The apartment was dark when I entered. Marcus wasn't home yet. Probably at whatever bar would still serve him. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt terrified. I locked the door, drew the curtains, sat on the edge of the bed and waited. Waited for what? I wasn't sure. But something was coming. I could feel it building like a storm on the horizon, dark and inevitable, and utterly beyond my control. And when Marcus finally stumbled home 3 hours later, stinking of whiskey and rage, I stayed silent as he grabbed my hair and threw me against the wall. I stayed silent as his fists found my ribs again, my back, my arms. I stayed silent because I'd learned long ago that fighting back only made it worse. But as I curled into a ball on the floor, tasting blood and swallowing screams, I thought of cold, dark eyes and a quiet promise. You're under my protection now. And I wondered if, come morning, Marcus would understand what that truly meant. I woke to the sound of my own whimpering. The morning light filtered through the thin curtains, gray and weak, casting everything in shades of bruise. I was still on the floor where I'd fallen, my body curled protectively around itself. Every breath felt like broken glass scraping against my lungs. My ribs screamed in protest as I tried to move. Marcus was already gone. He always left early after the bad nights, disappearing before I could see the regret that might or might not flicker across his face. The apartment smelled like stale beer and something sour. Fear, maybe, or shame. Both, probably. I pulled myself upright using the edge of the bed, biting down on my lip to keep from crying out. The taste of copper flooded my mouth. Again. Always again. The bathroom mirror revealed the damage with brutal honesty. Yesterday's bruises had darkened overnight, painting my face in shades of purple and yellow that no amount of makeup could fully disguise. New ones had joined them, a handprint on my throat, fingerprint bruises on my upper arms, a split in my eyebrow that had bled onto the pillow. I looked like a victim, I looked like exactly what I was. My phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. A text from an unknown number. Car will be there at 6:30. Don't keep it waiting. M. Marco. Of course. I wanted to text back, to tell him I didn't need a ride, didn't need protection, didn't need anything from people like Dante Castellano, but my fingers hovered over the screen without typing. What would be the point? Men like that didn't take no for an answer. The shower felt like punishment, hot water finding every cut and bruise with unerring accuracy. I stood under the spray until it ran cold, washing away blood and tears, and the scent of violence that seemed to cling to my skin. Makeup took longer today, layer after layer of concealer, foundation thick enough to hide the worst of it. I used every trick I'd learned, color corrector for the bruises, powder to set it all, contour to redirect attention. When I finished, I looked almost human. Almost normal. The black Mercedes was idling in front of my building at exactly 6:30. Marco didn't get out, didn't open the door for me. I climbed into the backseat on my own, wincing as the movement pulled at my injured ribs. The interior smelled like leather and that same expensive cologne I'd noticed yesterday. My stomach twisted with anxiety. "Morning," Marco said, his eyes finding mine in the rearview mirror. I said nothing. What was there to say? "Boss wants to see you before your shift." My heart stuttered. "Why?" "That's between you and him." His tone was neutral, giving nothing away. "Don't worry. He doesn't bite. Usually. The joke, if it was a joke, did nothing to calm my nerves." We drove in silence through the waking city. Instead of turning toward Romano's, Marco navigated through streets I didn't recognize, heading into a part of town where buildings grew taller and more expensive with each passing block. Old money lived here. Power lived here. The Mercedes pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a building that gleamed like black glass against the morning sky. Marco parked in a spot marked reserved, Castellano, and finally turned to look at me properly. "5th floor," he said. "Elevator's that way. He's expecting you." "What if I don't want to go up?" Something that might have been sympathy flickered across his face. "Then I'll carry you up. Either way, you're going up." I got out of the car. The elevator was all mirrors and polished chrome, showing me my reflection from every angle. I looked small in that space, insignificant, breakable. I pressed the button for the 5th floor with a trembling finger and watched the numbers climb. The doors opened onto a private foyer. All marble floors and expensive art and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A receptionist sat behind a sleek desk, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, her expression carefully neutral. "Mia?" she asked, though she clearly already knew who I was. I nodded. "Mr. Castellano is in his office, through those doors straight ahead." My legs felt like water as I crossed the foyer. The double doors were heavy, solid wood that probably cost more than everything I owned. I raised my hand to knock, but before my knuckles could connect, a voice called out from inside. "Come in, Mia." He knew. Of course he knew. I pushed open the door. Dante Castellano's office was exactly what I expected. Luxurious without being ostentatious, powerful without being loud, dark wood furniture, more windows showcasing the city spread out below like a kingdom. He stood behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, one hand in his pocket. He looked different without the crowd of men surrounding him, younger, more dangerous. He held up a finger, 1 minute, and continued his conversation in rapid Italian. I caught only fragments, but his tone was cold, dismissive. When he finished, he set the phone down with careful precision and finally looked at me, really looked at me. His expression went from neutral to something dark and furious in the span of a heartbeat. He crossed the space between us in 3 long strides, and before I could step back, his hands were on my face, tilting it toward the light streaming through the windows. He did this. It wasn't a question. "After I specifically told Vincent to watch your building. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't." His voice was soft, but carried the weight of absolute authority. "I've spent my entire life learning to read people, Mia. You're not a good liar." His thumbs traced the edges of the new bruises with a gentleness that made my throat tight. This close, I could see details I'd missed yesterday. A small scar through his left eyebrow, flecks of amber in his dark eyes, the sharp line of his jaw clenched with barely controlled rage. "Who is he?" Dante asked. "Nobody," Just name. The command in his voice made me answer before I could think better of it. Marcus Cole. My husband. Something dangerous flashed across his face. Husband. Yes. You don't wear a ring. I pulled my hands from his, wrapping my arms around myself protectively. He sold it, 6 months ago, for drinking money. Dante's jaw tightened. He turned away from me, walking to the windows, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. How long? 2 years. The marriage. I couldn't say it. Couldn't name what Marcus did to me night after night. The abuse. Dante finished for me, his tone flat. 2 years of him putting his hands on you, beating you, terrorizing you in your own home. Shame burned in my chest. It's not what? Not that bad? Not his fault? He turned back to me, and the fury in his eyes stole my breath. Let me make something very clear, Mia. What's happening to you is not acceptable. It's not normal. And it ends today. You can't just... I can do whatever I want. He moved closer again, crowding my space in a way that should have frightened me, but didn't. This is my city. These are my streets, and you are under my protection now. That means nobody touches you without consequences. I don't understand. My voice came out small, broken. Why do you care? I'm nobody. I'm just a waitress. You don't even know me. For a long moment he said nothing. His eyes searched my face like he was looking for something specific, some answer to a question I didn't understand. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer, almost sad. My mother was a waitress 25 years ago, before my father found her, before he saved her from a man who liked to use his fists more than his words. His hand lifted, fingers barely touching the bruise on my cheekbone. I was 5 years old the first time I saw that man's broken body in our driveway. My father never told me what happened. He didn't have to. I understood even then. Some lines once crossed cannot be uncrossed. The confession hung between us, heavy with implications I was afraid to examine too closely. I'm not your mother, I whispered. No, you're not. His hand dropped. But that doesn't mean I'll stand by and watch history repeat itself in my city, under my watch. So what happens now? A cold smile touched his lips. Now we go to Romano's. You serve tables. You smile at customers. You pretend everything is normal, and tonight, when your husband comes home expecting to find his punching bag waiting, the smile widened, sharp as a blade. He'll find me instead. Terror and something else, something that felt dangerously like hope, twisted in my chest. You can't kill him, can't I? Please. I don't know why I was begging for Marcus's life. He'd spent 2 years destroying mine. But the thought of being responsible for his death, even indirectly, made bile rise in my throat. Please don't kill him. Dante studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. I won't kill him, but he will learn what happens to men who touch things that belong to me. I don't belong to you, don't you? He leaned in, his lips close to my ear, his breath warm against my skin. The moment you served my table yesterday, the moment I saw those bruises and decided they offended me, you became mine. You just didn't know it yet. He stepped back before I could process his words, already moving toward the door. Marco will take you to work. Act normal. Do your job. I'll handle everything else. Mr. Castellano, Dante. He looked back at me, his expression softening slightly. You'll call me Dante. And Mia, whatever happens tonight, remember that you didn't ask for my protection. I gave it freely. His consequences are his own. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in his office with my racing heart and the terrifying realization that my life would never be the same. The day at Romano's passed in a blur of anxiety. I moved through my shift on autopilot, serving tables, pouring wine, pretending everything was fine. But my hands shook every time I set down a glass, and I kept glancing at the entrance, half expecting Marcus to appear. Giuseppe noticed. He always noticed. Whatever's happening, Piccola, he said quietly during a lull. It's out of my hands now. You understand? The Castellanos? They protect what they claim, but they also own what they protect. I understood. I just didn't want to. Marco drove me home as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of fire. We didn't speak. What was there to say? He parked in front of my building but didn't let me out immediately. He'll be here soon, Marco said. The boss, with Vincent and Tony, they'll handle it. Handle it how? However needs handling. His eyes met mine in the mirror. Mia, listen to me. Don't go inside until we're done. Wait in the coffee shop across the street. I'll come get you when it's safe. It's my apartment. Not anymore, it's not. Not tonight. His voice was firm. Boss's orders. Coffee shop. Now. I got out of the car and crossed to the small cafe that stayed open late serving the night shift workers. I ordered coffee I didn't drink and sat by the window, watching my building like it might explode at any moment. 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up. Dante emerged first, followed by two men who could only be Vincent and Tony. Huge, scarred, dangerous. They looked like violence personified. I watched them enter my building, watched the lights flicker on in my apartment window 3 floors up. And then I waited, my heart hammering against my bruised ribs, wondering what exactly I'd unleashed. The coffee in front of me had gone cold an hour ago, but I couldn't stop staring at it, my hands wrapped around the ceramic mug like it was the only thing anchoring me to reality. Through the cafe window, I watched shadows move behind my apartment curtains. Sharp, violent movements that made my stomach clench with dread. What was happening up there? What were they doing to Marcus? The rational part of my brain, the part that had survived 2 years of abuse, whispered that I shouldn't care, that Marcus deserved whatever Dante Castellano decided to do to him. But another part, the part that still remembered the man Marcus had been before the drinking and the rage, felt sick with guilt. More coffee, hun? The waitress appeared at my elbow, pot in hand, concern creasing her weathered face. I shook my head. I'm fine. Thank you. She lingered, clearly wanting to say something more, but a look from someone near the counter made her retreat. I glanced over and saw Marco sitting at the bar, his attention fixed on me. How long had he been there? I hadn't even noticed him come in. He raised his coffee cup in a small salute, his expression unreadable. My apartment lights went dark, my breath caught in my throat. I half rose from my seat, panic flooding through me, but Marco was already moving. He crossed the cafe in 3 strides and put a firm hand on my shoulder, pressing me back down. Stay, he ordered quietly. They're coming down now. Is he? I couldn't finish the question. Alive? Yes. The boss keeps his promises. Marco's tone was neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Breathing? Also yes. Walking. That's going to be questionable for a few weeks. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt nauseous. The cafe door opened and Dante walked in. He looked exactly the same as he had this morning. Suit still immaculate, hair still perfectly styled, expression still coldly controlled. But there was something different about him now, something dark and satisfied that made him seem more dangerous than ever. His knuckles were raw and split, blood crusting around the edges. He crossed directly to my table and slid into the seat across from me. Up close, I could see the splatter of blood on his collar, barely visible against the black fabric. His eyes were hard, glittering with an emotion I couldn't name. It's done, he said simply. What did you do to him? What needed doing? He reached across the table and took my hand, his thumb rubbing circles against my palm. The gesture was almost tender, completely at odds with the violence I knew he'd just committed. He won't touch you again, Mia. He won't even look at you again. I made certain of it. You said you wouldn't kill him, and I didn't. He's alive, conscious, and very aware of the new reality of his situation. Dante's smile was cold. I explained in detail what would happen if he ever came within 100 feet of you again. I also explained what would happen to everyone he's ever cared about if he decided to ignore that warning. He understood. Men like him always do when faced with consequences they can't fight. I pulled my hand away, wrapping my arms around myself. What happens now? Now you pack a bag. Whatever you need for the next few days. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket like we were discussing dinner plans instead of the complete upheaval of my life. "You're not staying in that apartment anymore. I have nowhere else to go. You're staying with me." The words hit me like a physical blow. "I can't. You can and you will." His tone left no room for argument. "Your building isn't safe. Half the locks don't work. There's no security. And your neighbors are either too drunk or too scared to help if something happens. I'm not leaving you vulnerable while Marcus licks his wounds and decides whether he's stupid enough to try for revenge. So I'm what? Your prisoner now?" Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "You're my responsibility. There's a difference." "I don't see one." He leaned down, his hands braced on either side of my chair, caging me in. This close, I could smell copper and cologne and something uniquely him. Power and darkness and barely restrained violence. "Let me make this very clear, Mia. You can walk out of here right now. I won't stop you. You can go back to that apartment, back to waiting for the next time Marcus decides to use you as a punching bag. Back to pretending that makeup and lies will protect you from the inevitable." His voice dropped lower, softer, more dangerous. "Or you can accept that your life changed the moment I decided you were worth protecting. You can let me keep you safe while we figure out what comes next. The choice is yours, but choose quickly, because my patience has limits." I stared up at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. Every instinct I had screamed that this was wrong, that trading one controlling man for another, even if Dante wore expensive suits and spoke in cultured tones, was just another form of prison. But another voice, quieter and more desperate, whispered that maybe this prison would be different. Maybe this cage would have softer bars. "For how long?" I asked finally. "As long as necessary." "That's not an answer." A slight smile touched his lips. "No, it's not. But it's the only one I have right now." Marco appeared at Dante's shoulder, keys dangling from his hand. "Boss, Vincent says the apartment's clear." He packed what he thought she'd need. Dante straightened, his eyes never leaving mine. "Well?" I thought about my apartment, small and shabby and soaked in 2 years of violence. I thought about Marcus, broken somewhere upstairs, and the inevitable moment when pain would turn back to rage. I thought about the bruises hidden under my clothes, the ones that would take weeks to heal, and the ones on my soul that might never fade. "Okay," I whispered. "I'll go with you." Dante's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the building where I'd met him that morning. Marco used a private key to access the elevator, which opened directly into a foyer that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. Everything was elegant, expensive, and coldly beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights twinkling like earthbound stars. The furniture was modern and minimal, all clean lines and neutral colors. Art that I didn't recognize but assumed was valuable adorned the walls. It looked like a museum, not a home. "Guest room is down that hall, second door on the right." Dante shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over a chair, then rolled up his sleeves. The motion revealed more of those scars on his forearms, along with the raw knuckles from tonight's violence. "Bathrooms attached. Vincent put your bag in there already." I stood frozen in the foyer, suddenly unsure of everything. What was I supposed to do now? Thank him for beating up my husband? Ask what he expected in return for his protection? Dante seemed to read my thoughts. He crossed to a bar cart and poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into crystal glasses. "You're wondering what I want from you." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. He handed me one of the glasses. "Nothing. People like you don't do things for nothing." "People like me?" Amusement flickered in his dark eyes. "And what kind of person am I, Mia? Dangerous, powerful, used to getting what you want." I took a sip of the drink. Whiskey, smooth and expensive, burning pleasantly down my throat. "Men like you don't just help broken waitresses out of kindness. You're not broken." He said it with such certainty that I almost believed him. "Damaged, maybe. Hurt, definitely, but not broken. Broken things can't fight back, and you've been fighting every day just to survive. That's not fighting. That's just existing. Sometimes existing is the bravest thing we can do." He gestured toward the hallway. "Your room has a lock on the inside. Use it if it makes you feel safer. There's food in the kitchen. Help yourself to whatever you want." I have some business to attend to, but Marco will be outside if you need anything. You're leaving? For a few hours. I need to make sure certain messages get delivered to the right people. His smile was cold. Your husband isn't the only one who needs to understand the new reality. His friends, his family, anyone who might think about causing you problems. They all need to know that touching you means dealing with me. The possessiveness in his tone should have frightened me. Instead, it sent a strange warmth through my chest that I didn't want to examine too closely. Why are you doing this? The question came out softer than I intended. Really? Why do you care? Dante was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight of old pain. Because I was 5 years old when I watched my mother try to hide bruises with makeup. Because I heard her crying through the walls at night. Because I was too young and too powerless to do anything except pray that my father would come home and make it stop. He set down his glass with careful precision. I swore then that if I ever had the power to stop it happening to someone else, I would. No hesitation, no questions, no mercy for the men who think violence makes them strong. The confession hung between us, raw and honest in a way I hadn't expected from someone like him. Your father, I said quietly. He was the previous head of the Castellano family. Yes. Dante's expression hardened. He found my mother serving tables at a restaurant not unlike Romano's. She was running from a man who beat her, trying to survive on her own with a 5-year-old son. My father fell in love with her, married her, adopted me, and made sure her ex-husband understood that some mistakes are permanent. What happened to him? Her ex-husband. They found his body in the river 3 months later. No emotion in his voice, just cold fact. The official cause of death was drowning. Unofficially, he drowned after someone broke both his legs and threw him in weighted with chains. I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt a dark satisfaction that scared me more than anything else tonight. So, this is about your mother, I said. I remind you of her. No. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup my cheek with surprising gentleness. You remind me of every person who's ever felt powerless, and I have the power to change that now. So I will. His thumb traced the edge of a bruise, and I couldn't help the small gasp that escaped me, part pain, part something else entirely. His eyes darkened at the sound. Get some rest, he said, his voice rougher now. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. He left before I could respond, the private elevator doors closing behind him with a quiet hiss. I stood alone in his penthouse, my heart racing, my mind spinning with everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Yesterday I was invisible, broken, trapped in a cycle of violence with no escape. Tonight, I was standing in a penthouse overlooking the city, under the protection of one of the most dangerous men in the state, feeling safer than I had in years. I should have been terrified of what came next. Instead, as I made my way to the guest room and locked the door behind me, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. I didn't sleep. The guest room was larger than my entire apartment, decorated in soft grays and creams that should have been calming, but only emphasized how out of place I was. The bed was enormous, the sheets Egyptian cotton with a thread count I couldn't even guess at. Everything smelled clean and expensive and foreign. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Dante's penthouse, the quiet hum of expensive air conditioning, the distant whoosh of the elevator. At some point past 3 a.m, I heard the elevator doors open, and quiet voices. Dante returning with Marco, discussing something in low tones I couldn't quite make out, then silence. I must have dozed off eventually, because I woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the smell of coffee drifting from somewhere in the penthouse. For a disoriented moment, I forgot where I was. Then memory crashed back. Marcus, the violence, Dante's cold promise of protection. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Giuseppe. Take the week off. Paid. Boss's orders. Of course. Dante had already handled that too, arranging my life without asking, making decisions I should have been making for myself. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt oddly relieved not to have to pretend everything was normal. I showered in the attached bathroom, all marble and chrome and water pressure that felt like heaven against my sore muscles. Someone, probably Vincent, had packed more of my belongings than I'd expected. My toiletries, several changes of clothes, even the battered paperback I kept on my nightstand. The efficiency of it unsettled me. How thoroughly had they gone through my apartment? What else had they seen? I dressed in jeans and a soft sweater, hiding the worst of the bruises on my arms. The ones on my face were fading slowly. The makeup I applied this morning less like a mask and more like a precaution. When I finally emerged from the guest room, I found Dante in the kitchen. He stood at the counter in dark slacks and a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, reading something on his tablet while drinking espresso from a tiny cup. His hair was still damp from a shower, and without the armor of his full suit, he looked younger, almost approachable. Until he glanced up and I saw his eyes. Those were the same, dark, intense, missing nothing. "Morning," he said, setting down the tablet. "There's coffee in the pot. Fresh pastries from the bakery downstairs if you're hungry." I poured coffee, needing something to do with my hands. "You didn't have to do all this." "Do what?" "Any of it. The clothes, talking to Giuseppe, letting me stay here." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. "I'm not your responsibility. We've had this conversation." He came around the counter, moving into my space with that predatory grace that made my pulse quicken. "You became my responsibility when I decided you were. The rest is just logistics. I'm not a problem to be solved. No. You're a person who needed help and didn't know how to ask for it." His voice was matter of fact, but his eyes held something warmer. "There's no shame in that, Mia." Before I could respond, the elevator chimed. Marco stepped out, followed by a woman I didn't recognize. Late 50s, elegant in a navy suit, carrying a leather briefcase. "Boss," Marco said. "Mrs. Chen is here." Dante nodded. "Thank you, Marco." He turned to me. "Mia, this is Rebecca Chen. She's a lawyer, one of the best in the state." Mrs. Chen offered her hand, her grip firm and professional. "Ms. Torres, it's nice to meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." I shook her hand, confused. "I don't understand. Why do I need a lawyer?" "Because you're filing for divorce," Dante said calmly, like he was discussing the weather. "Mrs. Chen specializes in domestic abuse cases. She'll handle everything. The paperwork, the restraining order, all of it. You just need to answer her questions honestly." The room tilted slightly. "You can't just decide I'm getting divorced." "Can't I?" He moved closer, his voice dropping. "Tell me you want to stay married to him. Tell me you want to spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder, wondering when the next beating will come. Tell me you love him despite everything he's done to you." I opened my mouth, but no words came, because he was right. I didn't love Marcus, hadn't loved him in longer than I wanted to admit. But divorce meant lawyers and courts and confrontation, and I'd spent 2 years learning that confrontation only brought pain. "I can't afford a lawyer," I said finally, grasping for any excuse. "Already handled," Dante replied. "Mrs. Chen works for me. Consider it part of my protection services." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "Ms. Torres, I understand this is overwhelming. But I promise you, I've handled hundreds of cases like yours. We'll make this as painless as possible. Your husband will be served papers today. Given the documented abuse and the restraining order I'll file simultaneously, you won't have to see him or speak to him at all." "Documented abuse?" My voice came out small. "The photographs Vincent took last night when you were at the cafe. The medical records we obtained from the 3 times you went to urgent care in the past year. The testimony from your coworkers who witnessed your injuries." She set her briefcase on the counter and extracted a folder. "We have everything we need, Ms. Torres. You just need to give me permission to proceed." I looked at Dante, this dangerous man who'd inserted himself into my life without invitation, who was systematically dismantling everything familiar, even if that familiar was toxic. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because you won't do it for yourself." No judgment in his tone, just observation. "Because women like you, good women, kind women, have been taught that suffering in silence is noble, that protecting your abuser is somehow your responsibility. I'm here to tell you it's not. And what do you get out of it?" Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. The satisfaction of knowing I used my power for something that matters. And he hesitated, which seemed uncharacteristic for him. Your trust, eventually, if I earn it. The honesty in that admission stole my breath. This wasn't just about his mother, about old trauma reshaping itself into current action. This was about me, about seeing me as a person worth protecting, worth fighting for. I turned to Mrs. Chen. What do I need to do? Relief washed over her features. Just sit down with me and answer some questions. An hour, maybe 2. Then I'll handle the rest. 3 hours later, I sat alone on Dante's balcony, staring out at the city spread below like a glittering maze. Mrs. Chen had left with a signed retainer agreement and enough information to bury Marcus in paperwork and legal consequences. The restraining order would be filed by end of business today. Divorce papers would be served tomorrow morning. It was done. Or at least begun. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt untethered, like someone had cut the ropes holding me to earth, and I was floating away into nothing. The balcony door opened behind me. Dante emerged carrying 2 glasses of wine, handing me one before settling into the chair beside mine. For a long moment, we sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. Having second thoughts? He asked finally. No. Maybe. I don't know. I took a sip of wine. Red, rich, probably older than I was. 2 years ago, I thought Marcus was my salvation, my way out of poverty and loneliness. Now I'm sitting here in a penthouse with a man I barely know, letting him make decisions about my life. Is that what you think I'm doing, making decisions for you, aren't you? He was quiet for a moment, considering. Perhaps, but not to control you, to give you options you didn't think you had. You can leave any time, Mia. Walk out that door and never look back. I won't stop you. But I will make sure you're safe when you do. Because of your mother. Because of you. He turned to look at me, his dark eyes intense in the fading light. My mother was my mother. You're something else. What am I? I don't know yet. The confession seemed to cost him something. But I intend to find out. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was dangerous territory, this thing building between us. I was vulnerable, freshly escaped from one bad situation, and he was powerful, beyond measure. Every logical part of my brain screamed that this was a recipe for disaster, but logic had never kept me warm at night. Dante. His phone buzzed, interrupting whatever I'd been about to say. He glanced at it, and his expression darkened. I need to handle something. Are you all right here for a few hours? I'm fine. What's wrong? Your husband decided to be stupid. He stood, already moving toward the door. He went to Romano's looking for you. Giuseppe had to call security. Fear lanced through me. Is Giuseppe okay? He's fine. Marcus is the one who's going to have problems. Dante's voice was cold, controlled rage. I specifically told him what would happen if he tried to find you. He chose not to listen. Now he'll learn the hard way. Please don't kill him. I stood, following him inside. I know I keep saying that, but I won't. He stopped at the elevator, turning to face me. But Mia, understand something. My restraint has limits. If he continues to be a problem, if he puts you or anyone else in danger, those limits will be reached. And when they are, I won't hesitate. The elevator doors opened. Marco stepped out, his expression grim. Boss, we've got a situation. Marcus Cole showed up at Romano's with 3 friends. They're making threats, saying if Mia doesn't show her face, they'll start breaking things. Dante's jaw clenched. How many of our people are there? Vincent and Tony are already on site. I've got 4 more en route. Good. Dante stepped into the elevator, then looked back at me. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except Marco. Understood? I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The doors closed, and he was gone. I stood frozen in the foyer, my heart racing. This was my fault. Marcus was acting out because of me, endangering Giuseppe and the restaurant I loved because I dared to accept help. Maybe Dante was wrong. Maybe I was broken after all, because broken things didn't just hurt themselves. They damaged everything they touched. I retreated to the guest room and locked the door, curling up on the bed fully clothed. Through the windows, the city lights began to wink on, transforming the landscape into something beautiful and cold. Somewhere out there, Dante was dealing with Marcus. Somewhere out there, violence was being committed in my name, and I couldn't even say I was entirely sorry for it. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think you can hide behind Castellano? You're still my wife. I'll find you." My hands shook as I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Marco. Within seconds, my phone rang. "Mia." Marco's voice was tight. "Where did this come from?" "I don't know. Unknown number. Don't respond. Don't engage. I'm forwarding this to the boss and Mrs. Chen." A pause. "He's really stepping in it now, making threats while we're filing a restraining order? His lawyer's gonna love that. Is Dante okay?" "Boss is always okay. He's handling it." Another pause. "Listen, Mia, I know this is scary, but you did the right thing. Men like Marcus don't stop until someone makes them stop. Boss is just making sure he stops permanently." After Marco hung up, I lay in the darkening room, clutching my phone like a lifeline, waiting for news, waiting for Dante to return, waiting for my new life to begin, even though I had no idea what shape it would take. All I knew was that there was no going back. Whatever happened next, I was committed to this path now. For better or worse, I belonged to Dante Castellano's world, and that terrified me almost as much as it thrilled me. Dante returned just after midnight. I'd been dozing on the couch, unable to face the emptiness of the guest room, when the elevator chimed. My eyes snapped open, adrenaline flooding through me as I sat up. But it was only him, looking tired and disheveled in a way I hadn't seen before. His shirt was untucked, the top buttons undone. Blood splattered across his collar. "More than last time. You're still awake," he said, loosening his tie as he crossed to the bar. I was worried. The admission came out before I could stop it. He glanced at me, something softening in his expression. "About me? About what you were doing? About Marcus?" I stood, wrapping my arms around myself. "About all of it." Dante poured himself a drink, whiskey, straight, and downed it in one swallow. Then he poured another and brought it to where I stood. "Your husband and his friends are currently enjoying the hospitality of St. Mary's emergency room. Broken noses, a few cracked ribs, one dislocated shoulder. Nothing permanent, but painful enough to make a point. And the restaurant? Giuseppe's fine. Not a scratch on him or his property. We made sure the altercation happened in the alley out back." He took a sip of his drink. "Marcus violated the restraining order before it was even officially filed. Mrs. Chen is having a field day with the evidence. Between the threats, the attempted assault, and the text message, he's looking at jail time. Significant jail time. Relief and guilt warred in my chest. I never meant for any of this to happen. I know you didn't." He set down his glass and reached for me, his hands settling on my shoulders. "But it needed to happen. Men like Marcus don't just wake up one day and decide to be better. They escalate until someone stops them. I stopped him. That's not your fault. It's his consequence." I looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd appointed himself my protector, and felt something shift inside me. He was standing so close I could smell the copper tang of blood mixed with his cologne. His hands on my shoulders were warm, steady, grounding me when I felt like I might fly apart. "I don't know how to thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me yet." His thumbs traced small circles against my shoulders. "This isn't over. Marcus will go to jail, yes, but he has family, friends, people who might decide that causing you problems is worth the risk. You'll need to stay vigilant. Stay here where I can protect you." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." His eyes searched mine. "I meant what I said earlier, Mia. You can leave whenever you want, but I'd prefer you didn't. Not yet. Not until we're certain you're safe." The rational part of my brain knew this was dangerous. Knew that staying here, accepting his protection, letting him deeper into my life was crossing lines I couldn't uncross. But I was so tired of being rational. So tired of being afraid. "Okay," I said. "I'll stay." Something flared in his eyes. Triumph, possession, maybe both. His hands slid from my shoulders to cup my face, tilting my head back so I had no choice but to meet his gaze. You understand what that means? Staying here with me? My heart hammered against my ribs. I'm not sure. It means you're mine to protect, mine to care for, mine to... He stopped himself, jaw clenching. It means I'll do whatever necessary to keep you safe, even from yourself if needed. The possessiveness in his tone should have frightened me. Instead, it sent heat coursing through my veins. And what do you get out of this arrangement? You. The word was barely a whisper. I get you. Here. Where I can see you. Where I know you're safe. Where no one can hurt you without going through me first. His thumb traced the edge of my healing lip, and I couldn't suppress the small gasp that escaped. His eyes darkened at the sound. Dante, tell me to stop. His voice was rough, strained. Tell me this is wrong, that it's too soon, that you're not ready. Tell me to walk away and I will. But I couldn't. Because despite everything, the violence, the chaos, the complete upheaval of my life, I'd never felt safer than I did in this moment, standing in his arms while the city glittered below us. Instead of speaking, I rose on my toes and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like we were both testing boundaries neither of us fully understood. But then his arms wrapped around me, pulling me flush against him, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and hungry. His hands tangled in my hair, tilting my head to deepen the angle, and I melted into him, giving myself over to sensation. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. This is a terrible idea, he murmured. Probably. You're vulnerable, freshly out of an abusive marriage. I should know better. Should you? I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Or should I finally get to make my own choices about who I want to be with? A smile tugged at his lips. Is that what this is? A choice? Yes. And it was. For the first time in years, I was choosing something for myself. Not because I was desperate or afraid or had no other options. I'm choosing you, whatever that means. It means everything changes. His hands framed my face again, his expression serious. I'm not an easy man, Mia. I have enemies. My world is dangerous, and I'm possessive in ways that will probably drive you crazy. More possessive than locking me in a penthouse for my own protection? Much more. But he was smiling now, genuinely smiling in a way that transformed his entire face. I don't share. I don't do casual. And once I claim something as mine, I don't let go easily. Claim? I raised an eyebrow. I'm not a possession. No, you're not. You're something far more valuable. He kissed me again, softer this time. You're the first thing in a very long time that I want to protect, not because I have to, but because I want to. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of strange normalcy. I stayed in Dante's penthouse, gradually moving from the guest room into his space. Not into his bed. Not yet, despite the tension that crackled between us, but into his life. I cooked dinners while he worked late. I read on the balcony while he took calls in Italian that I couldn't understand. I learned the rhythms of his days, the subtle tells that indicated when he was stressed or tired or dealing with something dangerous. Mrs. Chen kept me updated on the divorce proceedings. Marcus had been arrested for violating the restraining order and assault. He was currently sitting in county jail, unable to make bail. His public defender was pushing for a plea deal. The divorce would be finalized within 60 days. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt caught between two worlds, the old life that was ending and a new one that hadn't fully begun. Giuseppe called weekly, checking on me, assuring me my job was waiting whenever I was ready to return. The other servers sent care packages, mostly chocolate and trashy magazines that made me laugh. Even Marco, stoic and professional, started leaving little things for me. A book he thought I'd like, pastries from my favorite bakery, a weighted blanket when he noticed I had trouble sleeping. But it was Dante who consumed my thoughts. He was different in private than he was in public. Softer, more vulnerable, though he tried to hide it. I learned that he had nightmares, waking sometimes in the early hours with a gasp, and reaching for the gun he kept in his nightstand. I learned that he called his mother every Sunday, speaking in rapid Italian while pacing the balcony. I learned that despite the violence his world demanded, He was gentle with me, always checking, always asking permission before crossing boundaries. We didn't talk about what we were. Dating seemed too casual. Together implied something more permanent than either of us was ready to name. So we existed in this undefined space, growing closer each day, the tension between us building like a summer storm. Until the night, everything changed. I was in the kitchen making tea when Dante came home early, his expression darker than I'd ever seen it. Marco and Vincent followed him in, both looking grim. "What's wrong?" I set down the kettle, fear prickling up my spine. Dante crossed to me in 3 long strides, his hands gripping my shoulders almost painfully. Marcus made bail. His brother put up his house as collateral. My blood ran cold. When? 2 hours ago. He violated the terms immediately, went straight to your old apartment building. When he found it empty, he started making calls, asking questions, threatening people who wouldn't tell him where you were. Does he know about here? Not yet. But he will eventually. People talk, especially when offered enough money or motivation. Dante's jaw was tight, his eyes blazing with fury. I should have killed him when I had the chance. Dante... No. His hands moved to frame my face, forcing me to look at him. I tried to do this the right way. Legal channels, restraining orders, letting the system handle it. But the system failed. He's out there right now, hunting for you. And I will not allow him to touch you again. What are you going to do? What I should have done from the beginning. He released me and turned to Marco. Find him. Bring him to the warehouse. Make sure nobody sees. Marco nodded and disappeared into the elevator with Vincent. I grabbed Dante's arm as he moved to follow them. Please, don't kill him. Not for me. Not for you. His voice was cold, controlled. For me. Because I can't protect you while he's still breathing. Still obsessed, still stupid enough to think he has any claim on you. He pulled me close, his lips brushing my forehead. I know you think this makes me a monster. Maybe it does. But I'd rather be a monster who keeps you safe than a good man who watches you die. I don't think you're a monster. He pulled back, surprise flickering across his face. No? No. I reached up, touching his cheek. I think you're a man who does terrible things for reasons he believes are right. I think you carry more darkness than anyone should have to, and I hesitated, then pushed forward. I think I'm falling in love with you despite all of it, maybe because of it. The confession hung between us, raw and honest and terrifying. Dante stared at me like I'd just handed him something precious and fragile that he didn't know how to hold. Then his mouth was on mine, the kiss fierce and claiming and full of unspoken promises. When he pulled back, his voice was rough with emotion. Stay here. Lock the door. I'll be back before morning. Dante, I love you too. The words were quiet but certain. I've loved you since the moment I saw those bruises and decided they offended me. Since the moment you looked at me with fear and defiance and refused to lie about what happened to you. I love you, Mia. And that's why I'm going to end this tonight. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the weight of our confessions and the knowledge of what he was about to do. I didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. I paced the penthouse, watching the hours crawl by, imagining 1,000 different scenarios. What if something went wrong? What if Marcus hurt him? What if Dante kept his word and killed Marcus, and it changed everything between us? The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. When the elevator finally chimed, Dante stepped out alone. His suit was ruined, blood splattered, shirt torn. His knuckles were raw and bleeding, but his eyes were clear, calm, satisfied. It's done, he said simply. I crossed to him, my hands shaking as I reached for his face. Did you? No, I didn't kill him. He caught my hands, holding them against his chest. But he won't be a problem anymore. He's on a plane to Mexico with $50,000 in cash, and the understanding that if he ever sets foot in this city again, that mercy won't be extended twice. Relief flooded through me so intensely my knees nearly buckled. Why? Why didn't you? Because you asked me not to. His voice was soft. Because I love you more than I hate him. Because I'd rather build a life with you than spend it looking over my shoulder for legal consequences. Tears burned in my eyes. I love you too. So much it scares me. Good. He pulled me close, burying his face in my hair. Fear means you're alive, means you're feeling something real. I'll take your fear if it means I get your love alongside it. We stood like that for a long time, holding each other as the sun rose over the city. My old life was over. Marcus was gone. The divorce would proceed uncontested. The fear that had haunted me for 2 years was finally lifting, and in its place was something new. Something terrifying and exhilarating, and completely unlike anything I'd experienced before. What happens now? I whispered against his chest. Now? His arms tightened around me. Now we figure out how to build something that lasts. You heal. I learn how to be something other than dangerous. We take it one day at a time. That simple? That simple. That complicated. He pulled back to look at me, his dark eyes full of warmth. I'm not promising perfect Mia, but I am promising that I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me. I rose on my toes and kissed him, pouring everything I felt into that connection. When we broke apart, both smiling, I knew with absolute certainty that this was right. That despite the chaos and violence and darkness that brought us together, what we'd found was real. So, I said, taking his hand, should I move my things from the guest room? A slow smile spread across his face. I thought you'd never ask. 6 months later, I stood behind the bar at Romano's, pouring wine for a table of businessmen who didn't know that the woman serving them was engaged to the most powerful man in the city. Dante sat in his usual corner table, conducting business with Marco and Vincent, his eyes tracking my movements with that possessive intensity I'd grown to love. Giuseppe emerged from the kitchen, clapping me on the shoulder. Good to have you back, Piccola. The place wasn't the same without you. I smiled, touching the diamond ring on my left hand, Dante's mother's ring, offered with trembling hands and a proposal that made me cry. Good to be back. Because this was my choice, to work, to build my own life even while being part of Dante's world. He understood that I needed this piece of independence, this reminder that I was more than just someone to be protected. As if sensing my thoughts, Dante looked up and caught my eye across the restaurant. The smile he gave me was private, intimate, full of promises about what would happen when we got home. I'd come so far from that broken woman who'd hidden bruises under makeup and believed she deserved the violence. I'd found strength I didn't know I had, love I never thought I'd deserve, and a future that looked nothing like the one I'd imagined. It wasn't perfect. Dante's world was still dangerous, still complicated. But it was mine. He was mine. And I was his. Not as a possession, but as a partner, an equal. Someone who chose him every day just as he chose me. And that, I'd learned, made all the difference.